mission is to prevent children in our country from becoming victims of sex trafficking. We take our name from Amos 5:24, let justice roll like a river and righteousness like a never-failing stream. We carry out our mission in a variety of different ways, which I don't have time to go into today, but if you want to find out more about us, you can go onto our website, riversofjustice.org. One of the things that we feel is really important is education, and today our focus is not going to be on child sex trafficking, but rather it's going to be on the impact that trauma has on a child who has been trafficked. In fact, the information is going to include all children who have had trauma in their life. I'm sure that all of the children in foster care who walk through your door have experienced a variety of different kinds of trauma and traumatic events in their lives. And so my hope today is that when you leave this training, that you'll have an understanding of how trauma affects these children's bodies and also affects their actions. And in other words, what I'm hoping is that you will go away feeling trauma-informed. Being trauma-informed means asking that question, what has been this child's life experience, rather than what is wrong with this child? Any incident or any experience that leaves a child or a person feeling hopeless or helpless and unable to do anything about their safety or their situation or even their life is going to be traumatizing to that child. The incident can be something that's real or it can be something that's perceived, but every child experiences trauma differently. And every child has results of an event, a series of events, a set of circumstances that's experienced by them as being physically and or emotionally harmful, maybe even life-threatening to that child, and their functioning, mental, physical, social, spiritual, and their emotional well-being. In the last probably 5 or 6 years, we've heard a lot about ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's an acronym for that. And ACEs are potentially traumatic events that happen to a child from birth until they become an adult at 18. And these ACEs are linked to health problems, they're linked to mental health problems, they're linked to substance abuse, and also the ability for that child to become a productive adult. Now, there are many ACEs, but there are 10 that are most common, and these 10 are ones that you would probably see mostly in the children that would come into your home from foster care. There's childhood physical abuse, childhood sexual abuse, childhood emotional abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect. If that child has someone living in their home who has mental illness or depression or has suicidal tendencies, that would definitely be an adverse childhood experience. If they have someone living in their home who is addicted to drugs or who is addicted to alcohol, children who witness domestic violence against another person in their home. And then the last one is having a family member who's been incarcerated for a crime that they have committed. Traumatic experiences don't just happen to children. They happen inside their brains and they happen inside of their bodies. And I think that we need to think that expression that's thrown around so glibly, that children are resilient. When we look at the definition of resilience, according to Webster, it's the ability to recover quickly from challenges. And I think the key word there is quickly. And this statement ignores children who have been traumatized. Resiliency can be attained for these children. It can happen for them, but it takes a long period of time. It takes great effort and a great number of people to help that child to become resilient. I know people say to us sometimes, if a child is rescued out of trafficking, they'll say, oh, they'll be fine, kids are resilient, but not when they have been traumatized. Children, especially children who are in foster care and children who are adopted, will oftentimes have something in their life and in their experience that's called a secondary trauma. So they not only have the trauma that they've experienced in their little lives, but they also have something that psychologists call a secondary trauma. And this secondary trauma occurs when that child is repeatedly exposed to particularly distressing details of the trauma that's experienced by another person. So it can occur after only one exposure to the details of someone else's trauma, or it can occur after repeated exposure to the details of someone else's trauma. Children in foster care and children who have been adopted have many times been exposed to overwhelming, uncontrollable, and events that didn't happen to them, but it leaves them feeling like they're unsafe, like they're vulnerable, and makes them feel helpless. And many times these children will show signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. So let me give you an example of a secondary trauma. When we talked about adverse childhood experiences, we talked about witnessing domestic violence of another person in the home. Now, when we think of domestic violence, we usually think of the adult male against the female, but it can be any member of the family. And let's say we have a child who goes into a rage and can't bring himself or herself back and begins hitting the mom, kicking her, maybe pulling her hair, while another sibling is standing and looking on to this. After that happening one time or repeatedly, that child who is standing there and looking on can start feeling unsafe. They can start feeling vulnerable. And they can say, you know, I don't feel safe in this house. Should I lock my door so that he doesn't do this to me? It just makes them feel very unsafe. And that is what we talk about a secondary trauma that these children can experience in addition to the trauma that they experience. Kids who have had these adverse experiences and situations and circumstances will oftentimes develop physical and also emotional strategies in order to survive. So when we talk to our girls who have been rescued, sometimes they'll tell us, in order to get through what they have to get through each day, being raped by the buyer, they'll block it out of their mind and they'll think about something that's really happy, or they'll let a song go through their mind to try to block out the trauma that they're feeling. Early childhood trauma, such as neglect, such as abuse, is going to change that child's brain. Their brain changes from a typical child to a brain of a child who has been abused. And it also potentially limits that child to be able to empathize with other people. It limits them in being able to regulate their emotions. It also limits them from forming healthy relationships and bonds with their caregivers. So maybe you've had a child in your home and you think, that child has no conscience, that child doesn't empathize with other people's problems, or I can't bond with that child. That's very possibly because of the trauma that child has been through. So trauma does have an impact on the developing brain. Now, you may have already seen these pictures of what is a typical brain and what an abused brain looks like. This picture that you're looking at here is a picture of our temporal lobes. The temporal lobes is in the front of our brain, it's in the cortex of our brain, and the job of the temporal lobes is to help us to form visual memories. The brain is what helps us to control ourselves. And the trauma that these children go through create neurological change in their brain. If you look at those 4 ovals there, you can see, looking inside of them, how different the brain of a typical child looks like and then after a child has been abused or traumatized, the difference in their brain. The physical structure of the brain has changed in here, and also the chemical composition of the brain, you can see, has changed. There's something else that happens in that brain when that child has been traumatized, and that is that child experiences trauma triggers. Now, sometimes I'll hear a song and it'll remind me of when I was a teenager, or something that I sang when I was a child. Or I might be in a department store and I smell a fragrance, and it might remind me of a fragrance that my mom wore or that my grandmother wore. These are all nice thoughts, but for these children, their triggers are totally different. Their triggers are related to trauma. It can be a smell, it can be a sight, it can be a sound, it can be a song that they hear. When I was 3 years old, my aunt and uncle adopted a little girl, and I was extremely excited because I didn't have a cousin yet. Now I was going to have a cousin, I was going to have a girl cousin, and she was the same age as I was, 3 years old. And so I was so thrilled when she was coming to our house and to meet her. And we were going to be dressed alike. And I can remember we had little plaid skirts that were pleated and little Peter Pan collars on our white blouses. And she was coming, I heard the knock, and the door opened. And she looked in and she looked around and she started sobbing and crying. And I thought, oh no, she doesn't like us. For the next few times when she'd come to our house and she'd see my father, she would start whimpering, hide behind her mother. And when I was old enough to understand, my mother explained to me, she said, we believe that what happened was that there was some man in her life before she was adopted who had done harm to her, who looked like my father. And this was a trauma trigger for her. It was reality for her. And after maybe 4 or 5 times when she realized that he wasn't going to harm her, everything was fine, but that was very emotional for her. And these trauma triggers are so intense that a person actually relives that experience, and they think that it's happening to them right then in the here and now. These trauma triggers are biological responses to stress and put that child in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. And it can also cause alterations to that child's stress system. So we can see here that trauma does have an impact on the developing brain. It also has an impact on the way these children respond emotionally. The adolescent brain, whether it is a typical brain or whether it's the brain of a child who has been traumatized, that adolescent brain makes their decisions based on their emotions. And these children may have difficulty identifying or even expressing and managing their emotions because of the trauma that they have experienced. The part of our brain that causes these flashbacks is the amygdala. And the amygdala is in the back of our brain. And the amygdala's job is to be able to store memories of fearful situations so that they can be recognized in the future if they come up again. And some children internalize their trauma, some children externalize it. When they internalize it, it might manifest itself in depression, in fear, in anxiety. When they externalize it, it's a lot easier to recognize than internalizing it. When they externalize it, might be anger, low frustration level, low tolerance level, acting out behaviors. Their emotional response to trauma can be unpredictable, and it can also be explosive. I'm sure you've all been in a situation where a child just goes into a rage and you think, my goodness, what happened? What brought that on? And that very well could have been a reaction to some type of a trigger from the trauma that they have been through. So that is how they externalize it. Internalizing it is where they have anxiety, they avoid situations, and they have something that psychologists call emotional numbness. And that emotional numbness is another type of a coping tool that these children can use where they shut out their feelings. This emotional numbness protects them from being hurt again. It might be something that they used when they were experiencing these adverse childhood experiences earlier in their life. It can be protective for them because we know that numbness protects us from pain. When I go to the dentist, and you probably do too, and he gets that drill out, we want Novocaine. We want to be numb. We don't want our nerves to feel that drill. And it's the same for these children. For these children, some people experience emotional numbness once or twice in your life, but for these children, it's ongoing for them. And it's a way of life to protect them from further trauma and further hurt. Now, trauma also has an impact on the behavior of these kids. And sometimes these behaviors that we see are actually intense reactions to their trauma. And these are what oftentimes cause people to put labels on children. You know, we said earlier that being trauma-informed means that you ask the question, what is this child's life experience? If you ask the question, what is wrong with this child, then you're probably going to be putting labels on that child. Some of the labels that we might see, we're talking about external, excuse me, I lost my train of thought here, showing externally their trauma. It can be lack of impulse control, that they have no control over themselves. You've seen that in children, or they blurt out anything. They're hyperactive, and they just don't seem to have any control over their emotions. They may act defensively, they may act aggressively in response to perceived blame about themselves. Also externally, they might use substances, drugs, or alcohol. Or internally, could be isolating themselves, detaching themselves from other people, where people say, what is wrong with them? You know, they're like zombies. There's another thing that psychologists call disassociation or dissociation disorder. This is when a child might seem unfocused, they might seem detached from reality, they might seem distant, out of touch with reality, and people just think that, you know, these kids are just zombies because they, you know, don't seem to have any reaction to anything. And this happens when these survivors of trauma insulate themselves from any of the physical or any of the emotional pain of that trauma, just in order for them to survive day by day. The moment that we see any of these behaviors is the time that that child needs to be given some type of help with a counselor, some type of counseling, so that that child isn't re-traumatized. Re-traumatizing is what happens when that child is exposed to people, to incidents, to environments that cause that previous trauma that they've had, and it seems to them like it's happening again. This very well could be what happened to my little cousin. She might have been re-traumatized when she thought that person was my father. Now, I don't know if any of you have had a victim of human trafficking in your home. If as a foster child, if you haven't, there's a good possibility that you will at some point in time. And youth that have lived experiences of human trafficking actually have the highest rate of adverse childhood experiences, way above the general population and even above offending youth. And that makes them particularly vulnerable to being victimized, re-victimized through their teenage years into their adulthood. And these are the ones who are very much in need of psychosocial services. Psychosocial services are counseling that relate to their psychological needs and also to their social needs. It would help them mentally, help them with their thinking. It would help them emotionally, help them with their feelings, help them socially to know how to relate to people, and also to help them spiritually. Exploiters are extremely attracted to children in foster care because they have so many vulnerabilities. Now, on the left-hand side of this slide, you may be looking at that and saying, oh, I remember that from psychology class or from human growth and development. That is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And he has taken our greatest needs, he's put it in the form of a triangle. He's taken our greatest needs are at the bottom, the widest part of that triangle, and going up from there. Traffickers will usually either knowingly or unknowingly use these first level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs in order to lure in a child. So let's look at what they are. Our physiological needs, these are things that we cannot live without. They're food, water, warmth, shelter. We have to have those to survive. And then the next greatest need that we have is safety and security. We want to be sure that someone is protecting us. We want to be sure that someone has our back and our safety needs are met. And then the third one up that they use is love and belongingness. We all want to have friends. We all want to have people that love us. We all want to be part of a group. And we all want to have intimate relationships with people. And so these first three levels are said to motivate people when they're not being met. So when a trafficker comes along and starts talking to a child and gathers a lot of information about that child and finds that they are not having these needs met, he meets them, and when he does, he will normally draw that child in to trafficking just by meeting these first three levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. On the next slide, this comes from an article that was written in the Texas Tribune back in 2017 by 3 reporters who wanted to ask the question in their own words, how Texas pimps recruit and sell girls for sex. And they got their answer by going to the jail and interviewing 3 incarcerated traffickers, 2 men and a woman. And this excerpt, this paragraph, is a direct quote from one of the men that they interviewed. And he said, if you meet a female and she don't got no family, she don't got nowhere to stay, but you got a little bit of money, you doing for her, you putting a roof over her head, feeding her, she going to end up trusting you, depending on you. Y'all have some talks about the future, selling her a dream. It's like, well, what are we going to do? What can we do? If you're really about this union, about this team, you're going to do this. This is on you. Now, if we think about these first 3 levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, let's see how he used these first 3 levels. The first one, our physiological needs. How did he meet those for the girls?
It says, providing her with funds and a place to stay and a roof and feed and all those are captured in the very beginning.
The warmth, the shelter, the food he's doing for her. How about safety needs? How did he provide safety needs for the girls?
Well, she ended up trusting him because he was providing for her. So then she thinks she's being safe and secure in that relationship.
Anything else? Did you see any other ways that he might be providing safety?
her like a hope and a future.
Okay? They always have great promises that they make. And they're, she's depending on him, and she's trusting him. And then the third one, love and belongingness. How did he use that third level to lure her into trafficking?
He refers to them as a team, and that would really get you going, thinking, oh, I'm in a partnership. You know, I'm responsible, he's responsible, we're gonna do this together. Yeah, it's a big word.
Anything else?
And he's explicitly letting her know that the success of this partnership is on her.
And he talked about a union. We, he referenced we several times, and they belong together. So I think that this helps us to see how easily these kids can get lured in by traffickers, and also how these adverse childhood experiences can affect them when they are lured in and when they are trafficked. So let's look at some key strategies that foster parents can use. I'm going to be really transparent with you here because I have two grandchildren that are adopted, and both of them had been in orphanages that they weren't good orphanages, and one worse than the other. They had endured traumatic events that no child should ever have to endure until they were adopted and brought home. And I didn't know anything about trauma really at that time, except, oh, that was a traumatic experience, but I really didn't understand trauma. And so when they came to us and they started acting out in ways that I couldn't understand, I thought, well, I know how hard my son and his wife worked, and the work that they did to adopt these children, the cost, and, why are these children not rising up and calling them blessed? Why are they calling them nasty names? Why are they going into fits of rage? And so on and so on. And then the Lord is gracious, and he brought across my path a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and many of you may have read that by Vanderkolk. And I said, oh, this is why this is happening. And then I was able to attend some conferences on trauma and trauma-informed care, and I understood that this wasn't them talking, this was the trauma that was talking. And it helped me to understand and be able to develop strategies to help them through their trauma. So I'm just being transparent with you and help you to see how I became so passionate about this topic. So some key strategies. I think that it's important for foster parents, for adoptive parents, for adoptive grandparents, to be aware of the many ways that trauma affects all the areas of a child's life, and then help them to know how to overcome those experiences. The good news is that God has made our brains with neuroplasticity. They can change. You saw on those pictures how that child's brain changed after being abused, but we can change that brain back again, and that's exciting to me. So it's important that foster parents know how to respond to trauma, and also know to refer them to a counselor who's been trained in trauma-informed care. There's many wonderful counselors out there, but when you have a child who's had trauma in their life, they need someone who's been trained in trauma-informed care. Now, research tells us that understanding the impact that trauma has on the brain is going to help foster parents to be able to better engage with these kids so that they don't become re-traumatized. Now, what about if a parent, a foster parent or adoptive parent doesn't understand trauma-informed care? What can happen? Well, I know what happened to me, and it may work out very well, but it can also lead to some things like, if they don't understand, it could lead to disruption in placement. We know that children need consistency, they need predictability, they need to attach to a caring adult in order to thrive. And these are definitely best achieved when that child has a stable placement. And it's especially true for children in foster care because they had experienced trauma in their home. They had the trauma of being pulled out of their home. They had the trauma of being put into a home where they didn't know anybody. And so it's important that we understand the impact that this is going to have on these children. And it can lead to multiple placements if the foster parent doesn't understand the impact that trauma has on that child. It can lead to poorer educational outcomes for these children because they have to change schools. And I would say also social outcomes, because every time they have to change schools, they have to get new friends. And that's hard, not only having a new school, but having to make new friends as well. Multiple placements are going to lead to behavioral issues. Every home that they go into, the rules are going to be a little bit different, and it can lead to behavior issues. It can also increase the missing of care episodes or running away. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, 1 out of 6 children who run away from home will likely become a victim of trafficking. And in that study, they also found that 60% of children in our country who are victims of sex trafficking have at one time been in the foster care system. So there is that possibility that if you have a child in your home who's had a lot of trauma, they sometimes will run away. If they've had multiple placements, sometimes they just don't want to keep moving from place to place, and they'll run away. So we need to be proactive. We need to have a plan. What are we going to do if that child does run away? First of all, the most important thing is for them to memorize your phone number. When they come to you, be sure that they've memorized your phone number so that if they do run away, they can, and want help, want to come back, they can call you. They know where to go for help. If they have a cell phone, then you should have their phone number as well so that you can call them. They probably won't take a call, but they would probably read a text. Tell them you miss them. They're welcome to come home. You'll do anything to help them to get home. And then if they do come back home, be calm with them. Let them know that they're welcome, you want them there. And also, don't ask them where they've been, what they've done. This might re-traumatize them. And also, when they're ready to tell you, they will tell you where they have been and what they've done. Some other negative impacts is that lacking support. When they move around from place to place, they really don't feel they have someone they can trust. They don't feel that they have support. Also, attempting to arrange respite care during family fun times like vacations and holidays sends a negative message to that child. They want me here, but they don't want me when they're going off and having a good time. They're just going to leave me behind. And sometimes children will think, they just want me here for the money. And I know that you all don't get a lot of money for having these children in your home, but they don't know that. Sometimes that's the way they perceive it. So it's something that we need to take into consideration. Some more strategies that will help foster families. Creating a structured environment for these kids, creating a loving environment for them, and an environment that includes trauma-informed care. We know that kids survive most and best when they are in safe, and when they're in predictable environments. And so we need to be sure that the things that we ask of them, the chores, the rules, the consequences, that our home is appropriately structured for their age. Now, having these two precious little ones as my grandchildren, I know that the chronological age is not the same as the emotional age. And I'm sure that's the same for foster children as well, because of all that they've been through and the trauma. And in our case, the orphanage, they're much less mature than other children their age. So when we design these things, we want to take into consideration what their emotional age is and not just their chronological age. It's very important that in order to build a good relationship with them, that when they first come, that you take care of all of their immediate needs. I've just been so encouraged over the last maybe 10 years knowing that now children that are in foster care don't have to come with a plastic bag or a pillowcase, that now most of them will come with a suitcase or a backpack with clothing that they need and with hygiene items that they need. But there are still going to be some children who have to be taken out quickly and they don't have the things that they need. So by meeting those needs, the food that they need, the clothing, hygiene items, that's going to help to build your relationship, because they're going to see how very much you care about them and how much you want them to have. Another thing, some of the children who might come into your home may come in from a different background, a different culture, a different ethnic background, and it's important that if they do, that you embrace their culture and let them know that you want to learn about it, let them know that they can teach you about it, and that is going to help to build trust. It's also going to help to build your relationship. So you might want to do something like, what's your favorite food from your country? And they might tell you, and you have no idea how to make it, and they don't either. So we go to the internet and we get a recipe and make that special dinner. And so this is going to do a lot for your relationship when they see that you truly care about their culture. So be open to new experiences. Encourage them as much as possible to get enrolled in sports, or maybe activities like physical activities like dance, or maybe extracurricular activities like art, music, drama, and find out where their strengths lie and then get them involved in extracurricular activities. Safety. Maslow had as the second level of our needs as being safety. And I think there's two kinds of safety. There's a physical safety and there's also emotional safety. And if that child, and we're talking about especially physical safety here, if that child that comes into your home has been trafficked, that child should be moved somewhere away from where that trafficker is, because these guys have developed a trauma bond with these kids, and they will look for them, and they know just how to lure them back in, they know just how to manipulate them. And so having them moved far away from their trafficker is really an important thing for their own safety. Think about your home atmosphere. Think about issues of the noise level. Does the child have privacy? Is your home a peaceful home? Is it structured? Are things predictable there for these children? Because they need all of these things to feel stable. Now, if it's possible, and in many cases it's just not possible, but if they can have a room close to yours, that's really good for them, because a lot of these children that haven't had experience with trauma will have trauma, night terrors, bad dreams from their trauma, and they need to get to someone and feel safe very quickly. So if it's possible, it's great if they can have a room close to yours, but just be sure they know how to get to you if they experience these not trauma triggers, but these night terrors or these bad dreams. Safety objects. Does that child have belongings with them or that you've gotten them that help them to feel safer? It could be a blanket that they brought with them, or a doll, or a stuffed animal. It might be pictures that they've brought with them. And these things make them feel safer. So if they don't have any of these things, purchasing something like that for them would be a great idea. Help them with their room, help them to make it their own. You don't want them to feel like they live in a motel room, but that their room is comfortable, they have some of their things in it, and that they can make that room their own. As much as is possible, we need to be able to respect their space. We need to be able to respect their personal boundaries, and then showing them love. Some people are huggers and some people are not. A lot of these children have been touched inappropriately in their little lives, and they don't want to be hugged. They don't want anybody to touch them. So it's good to find out, how can I show you that I love you? Is it a high five? Is it a pat on the back? Is it just a big smile or a thank you? But have that conversation with them so that you don't make them feel uncomfortable with hugging. So foster parent empathy and tolerance have been noted as the best predictors of placement stability. Getting a child to trust you can be difficult, and it can take a long period of time, especially if that child has had multiple placements. Trust is established slowly, but it is done with honesty, being consistent with them, being reliable to them. Praise them. Find anything that you can do to praise them and to encourage them. Try to make life fun for them. Life hasn't been fun for them. And so try to plan fun outings for them, fun activities for them. Let them see what a healthy family relation looks like. Help them to see what healthy husband and wife relationship looks like. When you talk to them and have conversations with them, use open-ended questions so that you can actually have a conversation and not just yes, no. And that way you can talk to them about themselves, and they can learn about you as you have these conversations with open-ended questions. Have clear boundaries for them, and with these boundaries, explain why you've made these boundaries. Why is it important? Let them talk, let them share. What do they want to add anything to it? They're not used to people asking them for their opinion or used to getting choices. So by doing that, it's going to increase your relationship with that child. When you're giving them instructions and directions, let them know what your expectations are for them and what you're expecting for them. If you are giving them instructions, state them clearly. Sometimes you need to say them 2 or 3 times to be sure they've gotten it. Sometimes they are not looking at you, having them look at you, maybe repeating them back to you, because you don't want to have any consequences if they have maybe something like disassociation disorder or some type of internalizing their trauma and they haven't really been listening. So you want to be sure that they understand your instructions for them. Always use a pleasant voice and a calm voice with them, and then we need to be consistent with our follow-through. In the last 5 or 10 years, we've heard a lot about collaboration and mutuality. I know as a nonprofit, we're always collaborating with other nonprofits, and I know you all are doing the same thing. Mutuality means sharing your feelings with the kids, sharing actions with them, giving them the opportunity to help to make their rules, to help them to set their goals, their consequences, making decisions, is going to make them not only feel important, but it's going to help them feel like, hey, I have a choice. They value my opinion. It gives them ownership. I know when I taught elementary school many years ago, in the beginning of the year, I would allow the kids to make the rules and the consequences. And they were always much harder on themselves than I would have ever been on them. But it helped them to own their rules. And so when they broke them, it was theirs, not mine. And so I think that's an important thing for them, to have choices and help in the decision-making process. Avoid arguing with them. Arguing is going to come to naught. That's not going to be helpful. Don't lecture them, with the folded arm and the pointed finger. That's only going to fuel the flame of any anger that they might have. And then recognize when your buttons are pushed. I think this is good on two levels. One, it's good for you to step aside. You might want to say something to them. I'm really very upset right now, and I don't want to say something that I'll be sorry for, or I don't want to do something that I'm going to be sorry for. So I'm going to maybe go out in the kitchen and wash the dishes, and I'll come back in about 15 or 20 minutes, and we can continue our talk. So now you have calmed down, but you have also modeled to them what they should be doing when they are ready to go into a rage or have a meltdown or whatever you want to call it. And so you have modeled good behavior to them, and that's going to be helpful to them going forward. If you can't remain calm, you just need to remove yourself from the situation. And once that situation is resolved, be sure you get that relationship restored right away with that child. So, applying the principles of trauma-informed care, we want to empower these kids, we want to give them a voice, and we also want to give them choices. Even if the choice is as simple as, do you want corn or do you want green beans for dinner? These kids aren't used to choices, so the more choices you can give them, the better it's going to be for your relationship with them and for them to become self-confident. Have honest communications with the kids. This is going to help them to build trust with you. It's going to help them to trust you. So always be honest with you. Kids can see through us very quickly. Take time to answer their questions. Sometimes their questions might seem silly, but they're their questions and they need an answer. So take the time to answer questions that they have. As I said before, give them as many choices and options as you can give them. Help them to set goals. Most of these kids have no idea what a goal is, let alone how to set it. But help them to set goals, to determine what is their plan of action to move forward and to heal. Now, you might say something to them like, remember when you first came 2 months ago, you were doing this, and now look what you're doing. Now it's time to set another goal and move forward a little bit more. And so you might want to say a month's time. Well, where would you like to see yourself, next month, this time? And they might tell you, and if they do, write down that goal or put it on your computer, and then help them to make the steps that they need to carry out that goal. And then get that out about once a week, and then they can check off what they have done to meet their goal. And always praise them for every step that they take. Help them to learn how to self-advocate. Of all children, these kids need to learn that. And that's going to help them and to be empowered. And It's going to help them with their self-confidence because they really don't know how to do that. So that's an important thing to teach them. Recognize their skills, their strengths, and build on those. And then always in your home have a atmosphere where that child feels validated and where he or she feels that they are affirmed. We want to constantly give them praise. We want to constantly highlight their progress. This is going to increase their self-esteem. It's going to strengthen your relationship with that child, and it's going to increase the likelihood that they're going to repeat that positive behavior in the future when we praise them and when we highlight their progress. I think it's good for us, and it is good for the children to be able to look back and see how far they have come. Sometimes we get so busy in the day-to-day, we forget that we are actually making progress, and so we need to keep these children aware of their progress. There's absolutely nothing wrong with providing incentives for them and rewards. Some people say, well, they should just do it because it's the right thing to do, but we all like rewards. We like to be rewarded for things. You wouldn't come to work if you didn't have a paycheck to pick up, probably. You'd be going somewhere else to work where you could get a paycheck. So giving them something that they enjoy is going to reinforce that positive behavior that you have witnessed. Keep those rewards small and keep them frequent. And when you give them a reward, always give them some verbal praise along with that. So let's say you walk into their room and it's immaculate. The bed's made, everything's put away. And so you say, do you remember when you came 2 months ago? And we have to keep talking to you. Make your bed, clean up your room. And today I walked into your room and everything was cleaned up. And so I'm gonna give you something to just show you how much I appreciate what you've done. Here is a bag of Skittles. I know you love Skittles. And then you want to do that for a couple times, and then you want to kind of wean them off the reward and go on to something else that you can reward them for. So giving them something that they enjoy is going to reinforce that positive behavior. And discuss rewards with them. What do they like? You know, if I did something really good and you gave me a Peter Paul Mounds bar, I would not want to repeat that good behavior the next day because I don't like coconut. I can't even swallow coconut. But if you gave me a Ghirardelli chocolate bar, hey, I would be doing that again the next day. So all that to say is be sure you're rewarding them with something that they love and something that they enjoy. Discuss rewards with them. What do they like? What do they enjoy? But you can reward them with other ways. Maybe let them stay up later on the weekend. Have a friend over. Have a sleepover with a friend. Let them choose a menu or a dessert. Give them additional time for an activity that they enjoy. So these are things that are so important for these kids to feel empowered, to feel that they have a voice, and to feel that they can make choices. Now, on these next 2 slides, I have a case study of a young lady named Brittany. And Brittany is a 15-year-old female, and she was initially removed from her biological mother at the age of 12 years old due to founded allegations of physical abuse. So let's look at Brittany's story and see if we can help her foster mom in helping Brittany to heal from her trauma. So Brittany is allegedly a victim of sexual abuse by her mother's boyfriend. After being in care, Brittany disclosed that her mother would allegedly have males engage in sexual intercourse with her in exchange for money and or drugs. Sex trafficking is what that is. Her mother's rights have been terminated. Brittany's been placed in level 1 residential placement, given her significant emotional and behavior difficulties. Brittany has also had multiple failed placements. Brittany also has demonstrated concerning behaviors such as smoking marijuana on a weekly basis and is currently in non-compliance with her medication. Brittany started running away from Miss Susan 3 months after being placed in her care and in her home. Brittany currently typically runs for approximately 48 hours. But while she is on runaway, Brittany does remain in contact with Miss Susan to let her know she's okay. If Miss Susan attempts to reach out to Brittany when she's on runaway, Brittany will not answer the phone call, but she'll respond back to a text message. This has led to frustrations where Miss Susan has shared how worried she gets whenever this happens. So let's put ourselves in the place of Miss Susan. And can you think about any behaviors that you could anticipate seeing or dealing with when you have a youth like Brittany that's placed in your care? Any behaviors that you could anticipate?
Probably stonewalling. She's probably going to shut you out because she's thinking, how could you possibly care about her when she's run away so many times and has rejected you so many times?
Okay.
I would say lying, the lack of trust that she has with other people.
Mm-hmm. I think she could maybe experience trauma triggers.
Oh, yeah.
Things that
Yeah.
she's gone through at home, before she was put in foster care, and also what she's gone through while she's on the run. And probably has a lot of anxiety in her life.
Mm-hmm.
What are some behaviors that Miss Susan could praise for Brittany? Now, having taught elementary school and having some boys in my class, little guys, that I thought, oh my goodness, you can always find something to praise them for. And so what are some things that Miss Susan could praise Brittany for?
Taking her medication.
What else could she praise her for?
Maybe good communication. If she's communicating well, it says like she at least communicates when she runs away, but if she's in the home communicating well, I would praise her for that.
Mm-hmm. When she's on the run, you mean? Or-
Either way, in the home or just both
Mm-hmm,
overall.
exactly.
To let her know that like Miss Susan still appreciates the trust and communication that she's having with her.
Yeah. Or when she's on the run, thanking her for reaching out and being brave enough to come back.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it speaks volume that she's even being like, hey, I'm okay.
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
like she does have some sort of bond with Miss Susan or some type of trust, but just like not praising running away, but praising, hey, thanks for reaching out.
Yeah.
And I think it shows that she has some type of empathy too,
Mm-hmm.
that inside of her, maybe you might not see it on the outside, but I think that when she does that, that shows that she does have empathy for Miss Susan. Number 3, what are some incentives that Miss Susan can implement to motivate Brittany?
I was thinking, to incentivize good communication, maybe having some kind of special outings just for them. Doing something she enjoys, like going to the movies or going shopping, and just letting her know, I'm so grateful that you've been communicating with me so much, and I really enjoy having this time out with you.
I think the same thing, like anything for Miss Susan and Brittany to bond together, something that Brittany really enjoys would be a good incentive. So like if it was shopping, but I would say for like if she's home for curfew every night,
Yeah.
then hey, on Friday let's go stay out a little bit later and go do X, Y, Z.
Mm-hmm. And then number 4, how should Miss Susan respond to Brittany's return when she comes home, when she's run away? What should her response be?
Welcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're safe.
Yes. And don't ask the details, I
Yeah.
guess. As much as you wanna know.
As much as you wanna know, I know. But I think that's an important thing to remember, because if they run away again, then they're gonna think, I don't wanna go home because I don't wanna
Deal with
I
the,
don't
yeah.
wanna tell what's happened to me.
Yeah, start with, are you hungry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, basic needs being met.
Okay, well, now we're going to look at a video, and I know probably many of you have seen this video. It's called Removed, and we're going to look at it, and then we're going to look at it out of the lens of trauma-informed care and talk a little bit about it. No matter how many times I've watched it, it's very emotional. But let's just, thinking about trauma-informed care, let's just look at a couple questions. What are some of the traumatic events that this child has witnessed in her very young life?
Domestic violence.
Physical abuse.
Neglect.
Mm-hmm.
Her dad being taken off to jail, I assume.
She had, she had to be parentified. She was a parent for her little brother.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely re-traumatized at one of her foster homes when they were grabbing her. And,
yeah.
yeah. Putting her in the shower.
I don't know, it doesn't show it specifically, but I wonder, when he picked her up and carried her in, possible sexual abuse
Yeah.
of the child as well. What are some of the traumatic events those are some things that, I guess, what I said would come under the next one, what she witnessed, but what did she endure? What are some of the traumatic events that she actually endured?
I mean, she was physically abused.
Yeah.
And then she was,
Separation.
separation.
Separation from her brother
Mm-hmm.
and her mother.
And the police coming into her home and watching an arrest and having to be chased down, that's very traumatic too.
Mhm.
She had almost all 10
Yeah.
of those
Mm-hmm.
adverse childhood experiences in her little life.
Yes.
Just emotional abuse, physical, perhaps sexual abuse. How was reuniting this child with her brother a game changer?
It provided her some stability, like in her family bonding. Something that was familiar from her situation that she was removed from, but something that was positive to her was brought back.
Yeah, gave her hope.
Maybe that sense of responsibility for herself too, because, to her, she was the one that was to take care of him, and now she didn't have that role anymore, so it kind of eliminated a lot of, I don't know.
Probably eliminated her anxiety
Yeah.
of worrying about her brother that she was thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Probably gave her some sense of safety too. Like, I have my brother now.
Yeah.
It's gonna be okay.
I was thinking, this really doesn't have to do with any of the questions here, but I was just thinking yesterday when I looked at it again, I was thinking the foster mom would have to have some kind of a plan, because the child is so used to just being the mother to that baby. The foster mom has a big chore ahead of her to try to separate and try to make her a sister again, rather than being the caregiver to that child, and to do that in a way that she wouldn't become angry and want to take full responsibility for that child. I thought, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but when she pulled that dress out and thought that Joey was going to like it, it was like a trauma trigger to her. It was a flashback where she remembered, I guess a dress was something like what her mom had worn, and maybe that's what the trauma trigger was, but that's what it seemed like.
The way I took it was, I think the reason the boyfriend got so angry was because she spent the money on a new dress, and that was a new dress. And I think that's how I perceived
Okay.
it, because, and I've watched this numerous times. I used to train with this, and I always thought that it was because it was the new dress, and that was the trigger for her. But also the game changer piece, I think it was maybe gave her a sense of permanency, because I think at first she thought she was going to be removed again, and then she sees her brother, and she's like, wait a minute, okay, maybe this woman's not going to get rid of me, even though I threw a temper tantrum. So I think maybe it was a sense of permanency for her.
And also, I think she knew that she was loved unconditionally, not just because of what she, the good things that she'd done, but that she was going to be loved unconditionally. Something else that just hit me was that mom, when the police came, how she ran after the boyfriend rather than after her child.
Yes.
That just ripped my heart out. And it's not uncommon. I mean,
No,
this
it's
happens
not.
all the time, but to just see that, I just can't imagine how a child would feel.
And even like at visitation, like the mom was focused on the baby, not the sister, too.
And then the last question, what are other things this foster mom can do to help the child overcome the trauma that she's experienced?
Say consistency and care, just showing up again and again and again to let the child know that she's always going to be there.
Anything else?
I think the foster mom being educated about behaviors and trauma and having that background knowledge too, to be patient and
Yeah, not take it personally.
right.
And not take it personally, that to understand that it's the trauma that's speaking and not the child.
Right.
I think with that too, being aware of her triggers, her specific triggers, I think helps foster parents know how to navigate those situations instead of it being, this is just a behavior. It is a behavior out of the experienced trauma, and that is the trigger. Like the dress was the trigger, and for future to know how to navigate those types of situations.
It's that question thing again, what's been the child's life experience rather than what's wrong with the child. Well, I'm going to just wrap this up and let me see here. Just talk about just a couple of things about how can you love on a traumatized person. It's not always easy, and I'm not here to say that it is, but what can you do? Oops. Here we go. Listen to them if they share. We talked about you don't want to ask them questions necessarily that are going to be triggers to them or upsetting to them, but when they're ready to share, listen to them, and even if you are shocked, don't let them know that you're shocked by what they're telling you. Because if you do, they might not want to tell you anything again, because what they're thinking is, I've upset them, and what I have done has bad implications, so I'm just going to clam up and I'm not going to tell them. So be there with a listening ear. It's okay to convey that you care. I'm so sorry that this happened to you. It's wrong that this happened. It should never happen to you. But what we need to know is they need stability from us, and they need empathy and love, because that's what's going to change their brain, and that's what's going to heal their brain. And then being consistent, we talked about that so many times today, but the more consistent that we can be with our love, with our character, with our routine, is going to help that brain to get out of that fight or flight mode that it lives in because of the trauma that they've been through. And then staying calm, that's a word that we used a lot today too. These kids are in a constant reactive state. You never know what's gonna trigger them. You never know what flashback is gonna be a trauma trigger to them. And they need to have people around them who are going to be calm, people who are going to be stable and not get all upset and act like the children are. And then being present with them. If we think about what does a baby need? What do our babies need to help them to feel secure? What they need, these children need as well. We are with them. We are with our babies. We hold our babies. We rock them. We sing to them. The primal way that we communicate with our babies is by being there with them. And for many of these children, they have never had this experience. They've never had anybody who's been there with them. And they never really attach to their caregiver. And so the more that you can be present with them, the more that you can show up for them, the more you're going to be able to help to rewire their brain. And then, this is a hard one. Don't take their actions personally. We have to know that many of these symptoms of trauma are very difficult to watch. It breaks your heart to see them acting out on their trauma. A child might act angry, they might be ungrateful, they might talk mean to you, they might be unkind to you. And it's human nature for us to think, hey, I'm the best thing that has ever happened to you. And that's our human nature. But this is a coping mechanism for them. And they might not even know how to respond to love because they've never had love before, and it just feels unsafe to them. When we experience something that we've never experienced before, it can feel unsafe. And we have to remember that our normal is not necessarily their normal. We have a picture here of a spider web, and it says normal is an illusion. What is normal for the spider is chaos for the fly. And what is normal for this child, you know, if you went into their home, it would be chaos to you. But to them, it's perfectly normal. When they come into your home where everything is organized and stable, that feels a little unsafe to them because it's not their normal. So my advice is don't give up. Don't become discouraged. It took that child's brain a very long time to be damaged from the trauma that he or she has gone through, and it's going to take a longer time to change it back. It can be done. We talked about resilience. Resilience can happen for these kids, but it's a long road to hoe, so to speak. And these children have gone through more than you and I could even imagine, and they are definitely true survivors. So I thank you so much for being part of this today. If you ever need anything from Rivers of Justice, just contact us on our website. We're happy to come out and do any presentations for you having to do with sex trafficking, trauma. We don't charge, we just want to get the word out there, and we want people to know how to protect our children, whether they're in foster care or not. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
God bless you for all that you do for foster children. You're my heroes.
Thank you.
Thank you.